The same. Climate change is the biggest threat facing humanity today. It will change what our future on this planet will look like, whether we act or not. But how we move forward to avoid the most serious impacts? Dr. David Maenz of Saskatoon has wondered the same thing and has recently written a book called The Price of Carbon. He joins me on the phone from Saskatoon. Welcome to the Prairie Naturalist, David.
Well, thank you, Jared. Thanks for having me on.
David, can you start by describing why you wanted to write this book?
Okay, I was in a position 2.5 years ago where I had some time on my hands, and I had read widely in the area of climate change, and had some frustrations with what was out there, especially books that were targeted for a more general public. The science, I mean, it's solid, and it's well understood. Economic policies to drive down emissions. Again, these are areas that are very well established. Yet, if you go to what the public knows and what has been published previously, I'd say there was a disconnect between how solid the science was and how solid the economic pathways was, and the understanding of the general public, and at times political leadership to actually put in place policies that were effective in driving down emissions.
So who is your book kind of aimed at?
General audience. Again, it's what I wanted to do was to put something out there that distilled the vast body of hard science into a package that was accessible to a general reader without dumbing it down. There's a few books out there that I would call sort of climate change for dummies that don't really accomplish that much, and I wanted to treat the audience with respect. And give them a good, solid package that objectively and apolitically covered the subject, and that's a challenge.
Yeah, for sure. I know with the climate presentations that I do, you get a lot of feedback or a lot of kickback online that this is just a hoax and this is just something made up and it's fake by the lefties and all this kind of stuff. And how do you respond to that kind of criticism? Okay, I think the way to respond to that is, most people have a lot of respect for the scientific profession in general, and they have respect for their medical professions. When they go for a test, for instance, a blood test, they assume that professionals are running the test very well, and they assume that the results are correct. And this is the same type of reverence, I would say, for science that should be just naturally in place. If you look at the body of evidence that's been put together by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, there's 10,000 authors for these reports that come out every 5 years, and the world experts from right around the globe have studied the issue inside out, have reached a consensus of opinion that the activities of man have led to an elevation in the concentrations of critical greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and the thermal absorptive capacity of these gases is well understood. You can draw a very simple cartoon figure of that explains the greenhouse gas phenomena very well, and it's accurate. So I would just tell people that the science is settled, it's very well advanced, and the consequences of inaction are accurately modeled for the future. So one of the solutions that you propose in the book is you see coming from the forestry sector. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Oh, yeah. Okay. The way that carbon cycles naturally, it's not a static thing. So you'll have carbon dioxide that's in the atmosphere. It's taken up by biomass, and is also taken up by dissolving in ocean waters. And then this carbon will be released from biomass and from the oceans to give you kind of a steady state effect. And what's happened over the last about 80 years or so, we've reached an imbalance, a natural imbalance with forestries, where the rate of deforestation and forest degradation has exceeded new plant growth. So forests have actually been a source of emissions globally, and it currently accounts for about 8 to 9% of global CO2 emissions. What has to happen is that forested area has to be reforested or new land turned into forest by planting new forest or afforestation. This will increase the biomass of vegetation on the planet such that the forests actually start to withdraw carbon. And this is vital to all of the models that end up limiting future surface warming as specified in the Paris Agreement. So the natural world, if you will, has to recover to the point where the biomass of forest starts to act as a carbon sink and draw down atmospheric CO2.
Makes sense. You also write about the importance of energy efficiencies, and how does that play into reducing our emissions?
Oh, this is vital, and it's the low-hanging fruit, if you will. Energy efficiencies. There's tremendous opportunities right across economic sectors to simply use less energy and accomplish the same thing. An obvious one that's happened and is happening as we speak is the changeover of lighting to LED systems. And the LED systems use 7-fold less electrical energy than a conventional incandescent light bulb, as an example. So that transition, it's extremely low cost, and that can happen right away. And if you look at use of electronics as an example, there's tremendous opportunities for energy efficiencies there. Within industries, again, there's tremendous opportunities for energy efficiencies. And what happens then is less electrical energy or other types of energy are used, and the greenhouse gas emissions associated with that production of that energy goes down. So energy efficiencies, that's the first and the least cost opportunity for abating future emissions.
Yeah, you look at LED. I was just at PD Mart the other day, and LED light bulbs were for $2. I mean, it doesn't get a lot cheaper than that to really save that energy, hey?
Yeah, that's just one example. Reconfiguration of building control systems is another example. It gives you an extremely fast payback on your investment. And there's been studies that indicate within a year, if you have an older building that does have control systems in it for lighting and for heating and air conditioning, updating those control systems will give you a tremendous boost in terms of energy efficiency used by that building with a very rapid payback. And what's happened in Europe, just as an example here, they've had carbon pricing mechanisms in place starting in 2005, and real emissions have gone down dramatically in Europe. In France, between 1990 and 2014, emissions have gone down by 29%, and it's a good news story that's often just the people aren't aware of it. And what's happened there is that the cap and trade system that's been in place for some time, what it does is it then provides an economic incentive for people and industries, large buildings, et cetera, to do things such as adapt higher efficiency systems and make those investments with a very rapid payback, and it works.
David, we've only got about a minute and a half left here, and I've got a big question for you. So I don't know if it's fair to ask you this, but the you told me about the IPCC recommends a 40% cut in emissions from advanced economies by 2030, ramping up to 80 to 85% by the mid-century to really avoid huge warming issues. Can we accomplish this, and how does Saskatchewan fit in?
Oh, boy. Very quickly, we're not on that trend yet right now. If you look at global policies, we're actually going to see a slight increase in emissions based on global policies right now. So right across the globe, the ambition to combat climate change has got to increase. And Saskatchewan has got to be part of that solution. We have, within this province, some of the highest per capita intensity of emissions on Earth. 67 tons of CO2 are emitted per person here, and a lot of that has to do with the oil and gas sector. There are opportunities to reduce emissions from that sector, and there's also opportunities to implement cost-effective carbon pricing in Saskatchewan that would allow us to start to meet our regional obligations to the Paris Agreement.
That was very succinct. Thank you for that, David. So you've got your book launch here in Regina happening on Wednesday, February 28th at 7:30 at Bushwhackers in Regina, and then you're going to be at McNally Robinson's in Saskatoon on Wednesday, March 7th at 7 p.m., correct?
That's correct.
Perfect.
That's correct.
People can come out and learn more about your book and pick it up and anything else?
And hopefully we'll have a lively question and answer session at the end of the presentation.
Perfect. I look forward to being there.